This is living history, and we want everybody in town. I've been in Cotuit my whole life, born and raised here. I'm not going anywhere. This is the best place in the world to live. And I want everybody to know how many things we have to offer. And this is just one of the many things we have to offer. But for a child or even an adult to come in and actually place themselves in this part of history is different than reading about it in a book or seeing a television show about it. You can stand there, you can touch the things, you can imagine your life then. I mean, I really cannot imagine living in this small a house with that many people.
The Dottridge Homestead sits along historic Main Street in Cotuit. It serves as the headquarters for the Historic Society of Cotuit and Santuit. The building's story begins in Brewster, however, as the home of Samuel Dottridge.
Samuel Dottridge came from England to Brewster to work as an indentured servant. While he was there, learned carpentry, was evidently a very good pupil, and as soon as his indenturement was finished, he married a local girl, Abigail, who was a widow. Her husband had died in a shipwreck. He married Abigail, and Abigail owned this house, which wasn't as big as it is right now. It was a half cape, I believe, at the time. It's now a full cape, windows on each side, rooms on each side of the main entrance, center, fireplace, and big kitchen in the back.
Samuel and Abigail's family grew, and it soon became evident that it was time to move. They chose Cotuit.
And they had friends who were moving here to Cotuit because it was a very famous seaport. Cotuit was a big deal back in the early 1800s. We had ships, captains. This is like Captain's Row right out here on Main Street. We had a tremendous amount of commerce coming in at the town dock, and Samuel figured this would be the place where he could set up a business and make some money. So they moved, and they brought their house with them. It was brought on an oxen sleigh all the way from Brewster. The reason being, in those days, there was not a lot of timber on Cape Cod because of all the storms. So if you wanted a house, you had to find the timber or import it or just bring your house with you. So it was an early RV. And they lived in it as they traveled from Brewster. It took about 3 months. Wow. I cannot imagine 4 children, Samuel and his wife, and Abigail's mother, all in a house that didn't have this room on it, and moving at all times with oxen.
When they arrived, they settled in the high ground area of Cotuit. Samuel became a well-known carpenter. He and Abigail continued to add on to the house and live happily in Cotuit until Abigail's death. Samuel remarried and moved to Sandwich with his new wife. After Samuel left, the home went through many different owners and was moved at least 2 more times.
So when you think of it, this house has been moved at least 4 times, and it's in pretty good shape. I mean, taken right up off of its footing, no basement. So it was eventually on land that was inherited by Mrs. Nita Crawford. Well, Mrs. Crawford started the Historical Society in 1955. And what they wanted to do was rebuild this house in the way that it should have been, in the way that it was when Samuel was alive. This is not the oldest house in Cotuit, but the oldest house in Cotuit is privately owned, and we can't set it up as a museum. So we have this. Mrs. Crawford got together with many of her friends. They had dinner parties to raise money. They put the word out all over Cotuit, please give me feel free to donate or leave any of your furniture, which comes from that period of time, the early 1800s. And the Dottridge house happened.
The house was moved to its current location and restoration began. It opened as a museum in the early 1960s. Effort has been made to create a period look for this historic home.
So this is the master bedroom. Samuel and Abigail would have had this as their room. There is a cradle here where a young Dottridge child would have been, and also one of my favorite things, the bathtub is here. It's this big, and it would have taken a while to fill with warm water, so long probably that when the last pitcher of warm water went in, it was already cooled off. But that's the way things were done then. If we lift this up, you'll see the ropes. That's a rope spring, I think you would call it. And this is a tied rope bed that holds the mattresses. This is where you got the saying, sleep tight. If these ropes became loose, you would sink into the bed. So sleep tight means let's hope the ropes hold nice and tight for your sleep this evening. This is a pretty fancy room. They have 2 closets, master closets. This is a big deal in those days. And we have some very beautiful pieces of clothing from that time period. Take a look at the waist on this. It would probably fit about around my thigh, but you can see how well made, everything was made by hand, and how small. They were very much smaller than we were. But this is a beautiful, that's just the top of a wedding gown. I'm going to show you the shoes that go with it.
Those are so small.
I can't imagine getting my size 9.5s in these. Yes, but they're amazing. They're hand sewed. Silk is probably from France, and I think only the proudest lady would wear these. Above the mantle, you can maybe scan over there. Above the mantle, we have the family tree, which was done by our historian. And every Dottridge, here's Samuel up at the top, and actually here are people who are still alive down here at the bottom. And that's an amazing amount of work that was put into that, and we're pretty proud of it. So this is Mrs. Dottridge's kitchen. It's quite large, but this is pretty much where everybody was. The main source of heat is here, and this was always on. Summer, winter, didn't matter because this is where the cooking took place. You couldn't go to Dunkin' Donuts. You had, whatever you had came from this or the oven over there. Also, we have some of the tools that would have been used in the kitchen here on the table. And there's a small room over there behind that closed door, which used to be the buttery, which we hope to be able to restore to the buttery soon. It isn't yet. This is where the family would be. This is where the kids would be playing if they weren't outdoors. This is where they would eat their meals, prepare their meals, sit after dinner in front of the fireplace. And the only time they would leave this room is when it was time to go to bed. The children slept upstairs in the loft, and it was pretty chilly up there because the fireplaces are here, but the chimney does go up through there, and it did heat the upstairs. Also, they used to use a lot of beach grass straw on the floor in the winter to keep the cold out, and they'd even put boat sails down over the straw to help insulate the houses. So that's a section of the original wall, and that's their lapping, they called it, I think, and the plaster over it. So you can see that there's no insulation, and things got cold and warm. Anybody who owns a house that's older than 50 years old realizes that there's a lot to do to make it not fall down. So this house has been in pretty good shape for a long time, but now everything is needing work. A couple of winters ago, we had the front door blow in. That was fun, in a snowstorm. And then we had no choice but to have to replace the front door. We've had things fall apart, things rot, glass comes loose from the windows, and the roof had to be restored. There's nothing you can do about it. And you can't just restore that roof with any roofing material. It has to be to the period.
$121,000 in Community Preservation Fund dollars will help pay for further repairs to the fireplace, exterior, siding, and more, ensuring this historic home is preserved for generations to come. Visit the Dottridge Homestead at 1148 Main Street in Cotuit.